Hello, everyone. This is Leilani Cawthon, the CEO and news media publisher and researcher at the Learning Council. And I'm also a proud EduJedi Leadership Grandmaster. I have here with us today to talk about the new normal, John Baker, who's the president and CEO of D2L. He's going to serve as our moderator today. Alvin Wilbanks, who's the superintendent of Gwinnett County Public Schools. Super excited to have you here today, Alvin. Steve Flint, who's Associate Superintendent for School Improvement and Operations at Gwinnett County Public Schools. I must say, you know, we've been visiting Gwinnett and Cobb and DeKalb and Forsyth and Fulton and Atlanta for the last 7 years when we were able to be there live physically and met a lot of you. And I just think really highly of everybody in the Georgia area, which is why we're saying, let's show off Georgia. Let's show what you guys are doing so everyone else in the country can learn from you today. Also, I have with us Dr. Emily Bell, CIO from Fulton County Schools, and Dr. Aaliyah Henderson-Rosser, who's the Executive Director of the Department of Instructional Technology at Atlanta Public Schools. Aaliyah has an awesome team. I've met your team. Just adore all of you. So at this point, I'm going to just sort of turn it over to John to ask you guys questions. Let's have a good open dialogue about what you're doing so people can learn from you all. I'm going to turn my camera off, so it's just about you guys.
Thank you, Leilani. It's great to have that wonderful introduction, and thank you for introducing the panelists today. I wanted just to share a few words about D2L before we jump into a few good questions, and I can't think of a better group to be talking to the nation than the folks from Georgia. I think you certainly represent many of the different challenges and opportunities for us to really learn from everything that's going on in this pandemic in terms of how to respond and how to put in place great learning solutions for students and for teachers. So I'm very much looking forward to the conversation here today. You know, the title of the session is Adjusting to the New Normal, How Georgia's K-12 School Districts Have Adapted. And I am personally very thrilled to have all of the great education leaders here with us. You know, for those that are not familiar with D2L, I founded the company almost 2 decades ago now to solve what I looked at as the big challenge, which is what's the most important problem that I could solve that would have the biggest impact on the world. And I couldn't think of anything bigger than helping to support educators in providing the best possible educational experiences. Because as you know, education has this wonderful ripple effect. It ripples from one member of your family to the next, throughout your community. It helps us solve many of the grand challenges of our time. And it also helped that both my parents were educators, my grandfather was as well. And when we set out to do the work that we're doing, we built a learning platform we call Brightspace. And we're very fortunate to have a lot of great client input into that, the building of this type of technology to make sure that we're doing everything we can to deliver on those exceptional learning experiences, better outcomes for students, making it easier to give engaging feedback. And really importantly for our clients is making sure that their teachers are set up for success with tools they love using, making it easy to integrate all these technologies, and just making sure that it's worry-free, especially in moments like this where students and teachers all count on great uptime and working on mobile devices and making these types of things more inclusive. Now, the pandemic is not a normal time, and we're very fortunate to have some great educational leaders here today. They're going to share some of their insights into what's been happening in our schools and what we can all learn from in terms of what we should be doing as we go forward. And I remember early in February, we had clients calling us saying they needed to put all of their courses online almost overnight. And this was internationally. And before a single school had closed in North America, we were predicting about 1 billion students would be out of school. And that proved to be actually a small number compared to what it actually turned out to be globally. And it was very clear to me that this was not an easy path that we were going to be taking, and that there was going to be, there still is, I would argue, a lot of fog in our way of being able to make very clear decisions and take very clear actions as we're mapping out the path forward for teachers, for students, for parents. And so the more that we can learn together, work together, solve these challenges together, I think the better equipped we all are to making sure that our students all have the great learning experiences that we're all striving towards. And so with that, I want to start on just basically setting the stage. What do your schools look like today? And I wouldn't mind starting with, you know, if you'd like, Mr. Wilbanks, maybe we can go to you first in terms of what you're doing, and then we can go through the different panel members to give us a good picture in terms of what school looks like today.
Sure, and let me first of all, John, thank you for the partnership we have with D2L. Over the past several years, it's been a great partnership. And particularly during this time, it's great to have a system like D2L to continue with quality instructions. What does the school look like in Gwinnett County? And I think we're not totally unlike schools across the nation, and certainly a lot here in Georgia. We are doing both digital as well as in-school instructions. I think we gave our parents a choice what they would choose for their students, and that's sort of held true for this semester. About 55% are in school and about 45 are digital. We're going to very soon, Dr. Flint may have something to say about this more, but we're going to survey parents again short term for the second semester, and we're not sure what the numbers will be, but we think it's pretty well fixated on what we now see about 55-45. Could change a little bit, but I don't see it changing a lot. I think to take a further look at what school looks like, I think we're all learning a lot. We're learning that you never know when you need to be prepared to do things you don't really know how to do long term. We felt very secure in doing digital learning of inclement weather days in short periods of time, but now when you do it for a full semester, it's brought up a lot of new knowledge and skills that our teachers are really, many of them know how to do it extremely well. Others are learning, and we know that the quality of instructions is very important. And with the doing virtual as well as in school, this means a teacher has to pay attention to both groups, those at home as well as those at school, and that has created some challenges that we are overcoming, and we're doing professional development as to how to do it. It can be done, and the veteran teachers are very good at it, but if you're new and you might need some help, and we've tried to provide them with the help for that. So to sum up, we are doing both digital as well as in school, 55% in school and about 45% digital.
That's not a small change to accommodate that big of a transformation, if you will, of the school system in that short of a time frame. Maybe as we go to you, Steve, maybe you can comment a little bit on how you actually got to that 45-55 split, and were you ready? Were you prepared? How if any of us could ever be prepared for that kind of a scenario playing out?
Well, actually, the first we had everybody on digital.
Yeah.
And we then gave them a choice to do digital in school, and I think that works out. I don't know what a change in terms of the ratios would do differently, but right now that's been pretty steady with us, and we think that's going to hold true for the next semester. Dr. Flint may have more information, but we will send out another survey on that. The big challenge was that when we opened school, we had rather than 25-30,000 people sign on, we had simultaneously about 65,000 sign on, and then it just kept growing. Fortunately, our elementary school started, our high school start early, about 7:10, 7:15, followed by elementary school somewhere around 8:15, 8:30. So there was a spread in that, and then middle schools 9 o'clock. By the time the middle school signed on, we had it worked out and had increased bandwidth and those kinds of things to accommodate the simultaneous sign-on.
Well, I think there would be that's incredible, the challenge that that presents. So no, I thank you for that setting. Steve, would you like to add anything before we go to Emily?
Sure, and let me also thank you, John, for hosting this, but also for the partnership really going back for many years. I think back in 2012, I know we were having some early on discussions about this. And, that's one of the things I would say. We've had a lot of good input over the years, and over this last year in particular, this wasn't something that a person or a small group was able to figure out. It took everybody working together. We actually reached out to all of our partners and got a lot of feedback. We actually have an ongoing now from the first day of school when we went digital. We learned we had a few challenges, and I think every school district did, when we had close to 180,000 students logging on just about the same time. We learned about some challenges, and we started a group every morning that looks at our network bandwidth and any problems that we're having with any systems, and our partners are a big part of that. So we're able to actually contain any issues and then correct anything that may be happening early in the morning, which who knew that we were going to be doing that back in 2012 when we started the discussion. When we developed our eClass platform in partnership with you, that really was designed for in-person learning, and then in some cases an inclement weather day. And we really hadn't built it at that time back in March, on March 12th, when we decided to go fully digital. We didn't have that idea that we would go one for a couple of weeks, but even more for the rest of that semester. And so, the learning that we saw during that time was extremely helpful to get us in the place where we are today. I do think that it's maybe incumbent to say it definitely wasn't perfect last semester. We didn't have set schedules. The technology wasn't as easy to work with because our teachers were at home at that time. As we came back second semester, we had spent all summer with professional development, working with all of our principals. We got feedback once a week on our guide to reopening schools the way we did. And so all of that feedback helped us come back with a very robust schedule where students are asynchronous for every one of their classes each day for a certain period of time. There are set expectations. We're actually following our instructional calendars, meeting all of the expectations for our academic knowledge and skills, curriculum and standards, with all of the different platforms and assistance for our teachers, whether the students are in person or digital. Obviously, there is some variability there, and that's something we're going to work on every day. And we're trying to provide the resources for our teachers and our staff and our support staff to learn what it is that they need, or it can assist them as we move into next semester. And I think, like any of our other panelists on here, we're going to be working to make this an even better situation next semester, whether our students choose in person or digital. So I'll stop there. We've got a lot we can talk about, but I'd love to hear from some of our other districts, partner districts in the metro area. They're doing a great job as well.
Thanks, Steve. Aaliyah, would you like to go next?
Sure, John, thank you. I remember D2L back in 2004 when we were.
Wow, I remember. That's right.
Yeah, our first online high school in DeKalb County. We were working with you guys. But as you can see, I'm in my home office. So Atlanta Public Schools is currently still virtual. We made that call about a week ago, a very hard call to make. In our specific county, our numbers, COVID numbers are up and past the threshold that we were comfortable with and that the Department of Health recommends for schools. So we decided to remain virtual until January. We do have live instruction though every single day. So there is synchronous instruction with our students every day. We use Google Classroom. One of the reasons why Google Classroom worked for us, if you remember, guys on the panel, was it 2007, 8, when we had the snow apocalypse that came through? It may have been a little sooner than that. And our city shut down for about 7 days. We had to figure. Yeah. We had to figure out, like, what are we doing for school? So we learned from that, and we called it weather wise. We're going to be, much wiser when this weather hits us like this. And we trained every teacher in the district to build out about 3 to 4 lessons, 3 to 4 days of lessons on Google Classroom. So when COVID hit in March 13th, which was, I call it D-Day affectionately now, our teachers were kind of ready to go with some lessons. We did have some built-in couple of days there on Google Classroom that they could launch and then start to kind of build from there. And just like everybody else on the panel, we wanted to make it better this fall. So live instruction for every class. Teachers must record their lessons, archive them so that students can go back and review if they need to. Lots and lots of a huge cycle of professional learning that's just ongoing. And I'm fortunate to have a team of educational technology specialists, about 22 of them, that support the teachers all day long. And if anybody knows, being virtual is a lot harder because the day doesn't really stop, at 5 o'clock. You still have teachers that are calling and trying to perfect this thing well into the evening. You're working with parents well into the evening. So that team has really made this come alive in our district and supported it. We've also instituted virtual professional learning communities where a teacher can just kind of come online, ask a question, and there's always somebody there, another teacher it could be, to offer some advice. So we're fully virtual right now, and I will turn it over to the other panelists because I know we could all talk about what we're doing. But right now, we'll stay this way until January.
Thanks, Aaliyah. Emily, over to you.
I am, first of all, just so privileged to be in company with my cohorts from the other metro districts. I have an interesting story. I want to tell my background just a little bit. I just came to Fulton a little less than 3 years ago, and I was serving in a district in South Georgia. I've been in technology leadership for right about 20 years now, total of 26 years in education. But in South Georgia, I was hungry for what was happening in the bigger districts so that we could model what we were doing after those successful districts. So I happened, as an education technology leader, to look at Gwinnett and what systems they had in place. So I saw that D2L was a part of their digital ecosystem. And so in South Georgia, we purchased D2L. Safari Montage, the learning object repository, was part of the Gwinnett ecosystem. So we purchased Safari Montage, and we were looking to provide that digital learning, that 24/7 access to digital content. And so fast forward, coming to Fulton, when I came to the district, I was the executive director of enterprise applications. So my job was to really look at our district applications and leverage the licenses that we had and make them more efficient. So when I got here, unfortunately, we really didn't have an LMS. We use an LMS just for our virtual program. It really is not a virtual school, but we didn't have a traditional LMS. Now, like Aaliyah, we learned from weather days, and Snowmageddon is a part of my vocabulary now. Wasn't so much back in South Georgia, but it is now. I understand that left quite an impact. And so we stood up Digital Learning Day. So like Atlanta Public, and I'm sure Gwinnett, we had opportunities where students were leaning into the digital resources that we did have. So without an LMS, I began really standardizing in the Microsoft platform. Some of our schools were using Google, some of them were using Edmodo, some of them were using Teams, but we started really leaning into our license increasing or optimizing that system. And by the time March hit, we were really fully able to use this platform. By the summer of this year, the superintendent said to all of our schools, as we go into fall, we're going to use Microsoft Teams across the board. So we use Microsoft Teams for our synchronous learning. On average, and this is just an average, we have 78,000 synchronous logins to Teams each week. So we are, like you guys were saying earlier, we are having those traditional synchronous meetings. With Microsoft, we're able to pull in all of our integrations. We, of course, use the IMS standard. So we're able to integrate other applications so the teachers can bring in high quality resources from Safari Montage or from other digital platforms. So we've had tremendous success in that. Now for me, like you, Steve, I look at the numbers all the time, and I've had to look at my bandwidth. And you know, we increased our network bandwidth from, since I've been, and I was just named the CIO in September, by the way, interim in July and CIO in September. So since I've been interim and to today, we've increased our network bandwidth from 17 gig to now we stand at 60 gig. Never in my lifetime would I imagine that we would ever have or need 60 gig, but we have it, and we have that assurance that, you know, all of this stress on our network can be managed because we have the bandwidth that's necessary. But we've bought some additional digital resources, and we have such incredible, Aaliyah, like you were saying, just incredible instructional technology people. Microsoft has been a great partner. They come in and they help us. We use Kennesaw State University has a number of resources that we're able to use in our district and in our schools. And then we have this wonderful group called Vanguard. Vanguard is essentially a group of teachers, sometimes administrators, who volunteer to participate in technology training and then lead train the trainer sessions. So essentially we have these technology champions all over the district in all of our buildings who are willing to lend a hand to other teachers who struggle with this new environment. And like Mr. Wilbanks was saying, you know, we're about 60-40 is where we stand. 40% of our kids are remote, whereas 60% are face-to-face. We're seeing about 90% attendance rates in both of those groups. So that really lends itself to simultaneous teaching. That's a new word. So essentially meaning, you know, a classroom teacher has some students in her room, and then she has some students she's looking at on her screen. That's new. They were nervous about it at first, but they are embracing it. And I do believe that that's the kind of change that's going to carry us forever. This will never be weird again. We will always be posting resources on a digital platform for 24/7 access, and attendance will no longer be tied just to a seat in a classroom. Attendance can happen virtually, and I do believe the paradigms will shift in that direction.
Well, I'm not going to do it justice trying to summarize the answers to that question, but each of you, I think, shared some great insights there. You know, I think we've definitely hit a new balance from just listening to each of you in terms of the balance between in classroom, hybrid, fully online. You know, things weren't perfect, probably still aren't perfect, but you know, the lessons you're learning, you're inspiring in terms of how you're adapting and trying to think of new ways to leverage technology or support for students or parents or teachers. All of those things are making a big difference. It sounds like preparation is the key, you know, to success here, and I'd like to dive a little bit more deeply into that here in a second. And you know, it's also hard to do this from a cold start. So if you weren't doing this prior, there's a lot of hard work that goes into getting this ready, and to do that on top of all the change is also not easy. So the heroics behind the scenes to try to make sure this is all well enabled and supported, I don't think should go unnoticed. I think it's very important for folks to understand how hard people have been working to set up students and teachers for success here. And Emily, your last point, this is a catalyst for change, like Snowmageddon was. And by the way, I was there for Snowmageddon. And the definition of Snowmageddon for folks in Georgia, by the way, for anyone that's coming in from elsewhere, is very different than what it would be in Canada. But nonetheless, it was certainly crippling for the city, that's for sure. I still remember all kinds of cars in the ditch as I was driving to DeKalb, as you pointed out earlier. Thanks, Aaliyah, for jogging back those memories. I'm curious on diving a little bit more into the lessons learned or surprises that you've experienced over the course of the last number of months, because I think there's something in those that we can potentially share with others. So who would like to go first? We'll go in reverse order. Or Leah, you look like you're ready to go. I'll go with you, Leah.
It was so many lessons learned. I think I was actually surprised of a few things. You work with our educational tech vendors, and I won't call anybody's name. Some of them weren't quite ready for the amount. I mean, my heart went out to them, but I also had stuff I had to get done. So when it came down to integrations and working with various systems, a lot of our ed tech companies had to adjust because I'm sure just even on this panel, there are customized things that need to happen in each district. So I think we actually stretched a lot of our ed tech companies to open up their platforms a little more to make sure that integrations were top notch across the city. And I would talk to my counterparts in Fulton and DeKalb and in Henry County, and we're like, is anybody else struggling with this vendor? And we kind of all were. And I will say this about Zoom. I will call their names. They haven't been historically in education. That is our live instruction platform. So there were a lot of things to think about. The great thing about Zoom is there's a lot of customizations. The horrible thing about Zoom is there's a lot of customizations. So it works, but you had to really think about how do we want students' names displayed across the screen to protect student data. If we're recording lessons, we want to still protect that student. So what does that look like? Chromebooks, they were great when you're just kind of running one or two apps. Not so great if you've got to Zoom all day and run Nearpod and run BrainPod and run, there was a lot. So I had Zoom was awesome in that we had weekly, sometimes bi-weekly phone calls with them regarding upgrades and different things that they could make work in the education scenario. They were very open to it, because I know they got a flood of calls from schools and school districts to try to stand up Zoom. And I'm happy to say that Zoom and Google now have a partnership. I won't say it's because of APS, but I will say they heard probably a lot of us screaming about the fact that these two things need to come together and work really well. We've invested in Chromebooks, I'm sure across the state, across the nation. And then we've got this awesome platform that is causing some issues. So just having those conversations so that each one of those companies talks to each other, which they may not have done before now. There may not have been a reason to necessarily do that. So I think we've kind of helped to speed up some of that development with our ed tech companies. Lord have mercy, hotspots. I mean, I just don't, if I never see another hotspot in my life, I'll be okay. But just understanding the amount of data that needs to be on a hotspot to do this work. We've become logistics practitioners. Like, we've got to figure out how to get all of this stuff out to our parents, especially when we were fully virtual. Like, that was lots of lessons learned about just logistics in general, food. Not only are we talking about technology, but books and food and things for our communities that were needed. There was a lot to consider, but I will say I felt like people were open to learning and understanding the challenges in a school and what it was unique to a school district. I think some of them have never heard of some of the things we asked for before. So we've pushed ourselves and stretched ourselves to realize, if everyone on this panel had the ability to create some software tools, what would we want to see happen? And that's the lens that APS came from with our developers, all of our ed tech companies. Please help us do the following. And there were lots of things that we needed them to help us do. And they were open to that. And at some point, maybe we can applaud a lot of those companies for rising to the occasion and helping us do what we needed to do. So that's just one of mine, but I'll be quiet and let someone else say.
Thanks, Aaliyah. Emily, we'll go to you here next.
Well, I'll echo what Aaliyah said. I was surprised to know that I had to be an expert in logistics as well. Trying to figure out how we were going to safely distribute devices to students. We had we distribute devices to all 2nd through 12th grade students. So from the beginning, back in March, when we said, okay, students are going home, we began trying to safely distribute devices. So we had drive-throughs in school, bus loops, and then we kind of evolved, and we have a hotline today. So we have a phone number that our parents, our families can call, and we have a number of staff members who answer those calls, and they ask all kinds of questions like, I can't log in, I'm having trouble with this, or my device isn't working. We use that hotline for tier 1 troubleshooting. And if the device is just still not working, then we set up an appointment for that family to go to one of our regionally based hubs to safely pick up the device and swap out the one that isn't working. That took a lot of trial and error, John. It took us several iterations to get that where it was a very smooth workflow. We were capturing that data. I have a dashboard, a live dashboard that I can look right now at the number of people staffing our call line. I can look at our hubs and how many appointments are there. Our data informs all of our decisions. But again, I was really most surprised by having to learn basically how to be UPS or a FedEx and distribute devices and hotspots as well. And I would agree with Aaliyah, and I would, I'm saying to my Metro colleagues here, and then of course to the nation, if we can do anything, I think that if we can begin to lean on a way that Wi-Fi becomes publicly accessible instead of the school districts having to be the ones to distribute hotspots, which Aaliyah alluded to earlier, really don't work, not well, not for this kind of learning environment, then we would be doing, our students and families a great service.
Thanks, Emily. Steve and Mr. Wilbanks, would you like to comment next?
Yeah, and Emily, it's quite a time to come into the job as a CIO. Congratulations. It's like, welcome. Oh, my goodness. And I would like to go back and just also agree with something that Emily mentioned. And it's really about the strategic nature of our work, and whether we're talking about technology or the processes that you have inside the classroom. The discussion that went around developing the process to begin with is so vitally important. So you've had this work going on for quite some time. You mentioned, Emily, the IMS standards, interoperability, the work between D2L, Brightspace, Safari Montage, all these others that work together. That work has been going on for many years for us. And that became extremely important during the early phases up until today, it was actually important even prior to going all digital. So I think that was a strategic decision that we made long ago. And I know, John, you and your group has been a big part of that work as well with IMS. So thank you for that. The other thing I would, and there's a lot of lessons learned here, but and I agree with Aaliyah and Emily. I might take it in a little bit different direction to just say there were so many things that were changing. We had to also keep an eye on what we could keep consistent. And there was a lot that we could keep consistent. So our standards for our curriculum, our academic knowledge and skills, the assessments that we were able to give, the requirements for engagement of students and time given to students, synchronous as well as asynchronous, the types of lessons and the variability of lessons. And so even though we were doing this at some point remotely, now all of our teachers and staff members are working in the schools, we tried to not veer away from collaborative planning time, working together in teams. And that may look a little different because it's on Zoom and we're separated, but I think the reason that we're doing the work and the strategic nature around there didn't change. And so I think as we move forward, it really is incumbent upon us as district leaders to keep as much consistent as we can. This is, and you've said it before, this is an extremely difficult time for all of us, teachers specifically, administrators. We're still continuing to do our walkthroughs. We're trying to monitor what's happening on instruction. We're trying to monitor student work and learning. And we're having to do it in so many different ways right now that keeping some consistency is extremely important. A couple other things before I turn it over to Mr. Wilbank. Parent resources have become extremely important. Those students who are digital, their parents are relying on us to get them information, help the students, but also help the parents understand what the expectation is of their students so they can help support them at home. So between that and the additional professional development, we spent a lot of time over the summer, and then currently providing resources that teachers can learn from each other. They can share in different open spaces, and then they can take that back and implement it directly in their classroom. And then finally, communication. Communication has changed a little bit. The nature of the need of communication is so important, but you know, there was so much communication going on. We actually had to look to make it more effective and not just more communication. And so I think we're continuing to work with that and learn different ways to do that. We have a number of different methods, as I know our colleagues do, but getting feedback from our parents on what works, what they enjoy, and how they enjoy receiving that information has been really good for us. So those are just some of the top things. I think we could talk for hours on this one, but those would be my topics.
Thank you, Steve. Mr. Wilbanks.
One of the quick lessons learned, I think, with us, we realized the last 9 weeks of the last school year, while we put a lot of effort into it, we tried instructions simply were not what they needed to be. So we realized that our teachers, whether veteran teachers or new teachers, needed some more professional development in doing this. So we actually delayed the start of school 5 days and increased the number of pre-planning days to 10. And I think that really gave us the opportunity to prepare our teachers to really be better prepared, delivering instructions digitally, as well as the combination, the concurrent instructions. And we're still learning a lot, but that was maybe the first lesson that I think we learned. We're not going to be very good at this if our teachers aren't good at it.
Well, I think those are excellent lessons, and I'll try again just to quickly touch on a few of them. You know, Aaliyah, you mentioned tech needs to work. couldn't agree more. I know I get daily updates on SIS integrations as a good example on making sure that those things work. And I think we as an ed tech industry need to mature and embrace these open standards in a much bigger way. It's a challenge when you have, in our case, we have thousands of integration points. If folks are not embracing those open standards, it can take months for these things to be stood up and done properly. So, I applaud you for the work that you're doing there and trying to get those that ecosystem to work together. And Steve, you and Mr. Wilbanks are an exemplar of doing this years in advance of when it's actually truly needed. And I think your pioneering work to push those standards and make sure that companies like ours and others embrace them is truly appreciated. And there are some good actors in the space. I know we just, for example, did an announcement around Infinite Campus as an example, just having a certified integration using one roster as an example of a standard that is popular just to get the rostering in and grades back. And I know that sounds simple, but it's amazing how hard it is sometimes to do this, and we need to make it a lot easier. Couldn't agree more. I also like your comment too, I think it was Emily, on the need for public infrastructure, that digital infrastructure is something that we should all be thinking about. Governments, as they're thinking about the response to this pandemic, need to help our schools put in place the right infrastructure to support students, and the digital infrastructure is a critical piece of that. And it's more than just simply broadband too. There's much more to it, and I really appreciate the tech support as well. It's one of the reasons when we were building our technology, we tried to make sure it worked on any device. So as you can imagine, some kids in a house might be sharing a device, needing to do things asynchronously, or there's all kinds of other different challenges when it comes to an equity perspective, and maybe we can chat about that a little bit more. And I really appreciate, Steve and Mr. Wilbanks, your insistence on going back to the core values and principles in which the school system was built around, whether that's strong support for PD for teachers and parent engagement and feedback and listening very carefully to that, and making sure that you're setting up your teachers with the right community resources. Those are all incredibly valuable resources. Each of you, thank you for sharing some of those lessons. I know we put out a white paper series over 2 years ago now, almost 3 years ago, on the future of work and learning and what we thought that would look like in 2030. I feel like that's upon us already. I don't know about you, but I feel like we've been pulled into the future. And so I'm really curious in terms of what each of you think of in terms of, once we get through this pandemic, and I know that that's uncertain in terms of when that will actually end, but how is this going to create lasting change within the school districts that you're supporting? And what will it take for us to build more resiliency to tackling these types of challenges in the future, whether it's a future snowmageddon or a future pandemic? And maybe we can start, Aaliyah, with you.
I think about this often, and I think education is one of those last professions to kind of adopt change. We're pretty consistent. We've been pretty consistent. And as a champion of innovation before the pandemic, and kind of like Emily for 20 plus years now, there's always been this fear. If I'm that teacher and I teach this standard well, and I go to my file cabinet and I grab those black line masters and I do what I do, and I make magic happen, why do I need to change that? And that was always the question that when we would talk to our ed tech specialists, help show them how to either improve on how they're doing instruction, or how do we increase student engagement. And we always have to come at teachers from these very creative angles to get them to try stuff out. And we always try to give them a safe space in which to try it out. So, no one wants to fail in front of 36 graders, like no one. So you want to create a space where they can do this and kind of have a safety net. Well, the safety net was ripped from us, and we didn't have that kind of slow adoption that education tends to do. So I think the blessing in this, if we can call it one in the education space, is that I do believe that administrators, building level, school level, central office will be more open to innovation. They'll be more open to just hearing out the concepts.
Mm-hmm.
But then I challenge us also, did we really pivot? I mean, we pivoted on some things, but I've popped into Zoom classrooms, and there's nothing wrong with this. Teachers still have their chart paper up, they've got their Post-its going, they've got their highlighting and their markers. So I don't know that we have changed the practice per se. And I think that that's the next level, is how do we look at changing some of the practices to truly integrate technology into what we do. I do believe we've done a phenomenal task in changing the modality in which we educate, but did we really change the way we educate? And I don't think that we've done that yet. So I still think that's to come. And some people will get what I'm saying when I say that, others may not. They'll say, no, I'm on Zoom, so I definitely changed. But I do think there's some more adoption of innovation that we haven't even thought of yet. And I think the pandemic threw us into that, where we have to start thinking about it, because I don't know that school will look the same ever again. We keep hearing, well, pre-pandemic school. I don't know that that's going to happen anytime soon. So we've got to start thinking way outside the box onto what that looks like. Emily kind of alluded to this in her introduction around, attendance and sitting in the seat. We're still counting that as attendance. You got to log in, you got to show up. I need to see you on the screen so that I can mark you present. We're still, we've got some new ways of doing old things, but we haven't changed the way we do old things. So yeah, that would be just my take on that.
Thanks, Aaliyah. Emily, over to you.
I'm really not sure I could say it any better than Aaliyah. I mean, she nailed it from top to bottom. If I'm looking at my job in particular, in technology leadership, I felt like a salesperson. For years, I have been selling platforms and adoption. Please use the technology. We do believe that there's an impact for student achievement if you use this technology. It's been a sales job. We've been in adoption mode. The pandemic came, and there is definitely a shift. They've had to learn and use the platform, but maybe we haven't gone to that next level of true technology integration. But they are at least listening to us now. We don't have to be so much in sales mode. They will be more receptive to new innovations. Now my job is to really make sure that the technology that we are using is safe, supported, and effective. Apologize, my lights go out here. We're saving the taxpayer dollars in Georgia, everyone. So those are the three things that I talk about in my role here as CIO, is using technology that is safe, supported, and effective. And that will be, the future. But like Aaliyah, I believe that there will, there's not, they want to come back the way that we always were. And in the same way that 9/11 impacted our country, and the way you go to the airport and travel and have to go through TSA, I believe our schools are forevermore going to have impact of this pandemic. And I'm encouraged. I was energized by the fact that, yes, we, like you said, John, we moved light years ahead in a very short amount of time. And I mean, I was excited, not for a pandemic, not that people were sick, but that the work that I have been doing for 20 plus years was coming to fruition, and we were actually able to make a difference with it. And it was, I've just really been thrilled with the work that I've seen. Yes, some teachers are still using chart paper, but some of them are doing amazing work with just their little laptop camera and integrating all kinds of software and being really creative about getting their kids involved with the classrooms. I was seeing the other day, one of our teachers was doing like crazy hair day. He puts on this crazy colorful wig for his elementary kids. Little things like that make this seemingly cold virtual camera be a connection, a relationship builder, a trust builder. Our teachers are learning that they can build relationships and trust with a camera in addition to face-to-face. I think it's exciting times for technology leaders. So I'm encouraged.
Thanks, Emily. We're going to try to open it up for a few questions from the folks that are attending the event as well too here. So if you've got a question, feel free to type it into the chat or certainly raise a hand. And you know, as we go to Steve and
John, this is Leilani interrupting. We do have a question from Mark Schneiderman.
Okay.
Let me just make sure I can unmute him. Mark, I'm looking for your name now. As long as you're able to unmute on your side, I'm going to unmute you here. Okay, Mark.
Hi, can you hear me?
And please introduce where you're from.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were going to be asking through audio. Yeah, I'm actually with D2L, and the question is really, to what extent are you all using asynchronous learning? How are you doing that, and how well is that going? Thank you.
Does anyone want to take that question? So it's, you know, there are multiple different ways to provide a learning experience today. You know, some folks are doing it in the classroom. Some folks are doing a hybrid where they're streaming what's happening in the classroom out to the world. Others are doing it in an asynchronous fashion where they're, you know, potentially supporting students at home, learning when the student is ready to sit down and learn. So anyone want to answer that question in terms of folks that have tried asynchronous as a methodology here?
Yeah, and before anyone does, I know that all of the panelists have talked a little bit about that already. So I'm just going to let you know I'm watching for other questions to come in. So everyone that's on the line right now, type in your questions or raise your hand. There's a little hand raising symbol there. I'll watch for it and call on you.
I may be the only one here without the traditional LMS. Again, I mentioned that we're using Microsoft Teams as our collaboration and productivity platform, but our teachers are able to record their sessions. And so for that reason, that's a portion of their asynchronous learning, as well as the resources that they get from our learning object repository, which is Safari Montage, and a variety of other resources like Nearpod. We have a license for that. We have quite a few teachers or district leaders who are working on asynchronous lessons, helping to build those for our teachers. So we're just doing some amazing work around creating a library of digital resources. And we've had to do that pretty quickly. But I think we're doing it very, very well. This year, we just reported our highest ACT scores for the 2020. That was just worth celebrating to me, because here we are in the middle of a pandemic, and yet we posted our highest ACT score. So something's going really, really right.
We're doing, our teachers are generally synchronous. We do have some occasion where they are asynchronous, and we'll employ tools like Flipgrid, so you can still have that interaction with the student. You can see them videotape, you know, they can put crazy hats on and do different things, but they're answering a question, or, you know, they're showing their knowledge, their acquisition of knowledge about some topic. Wakelet is another one that our teachers use, and Nearpod also. So we've also employed content management systems like Edgenuity, Freckle, ClassWorks. So teachers can always go back and see if that student was asynchronous, what were they doing that day, how long were they doing it. You can still have that interaction even though that student may just be dropping or recording in. and you can kind of grade and see and understand whether or not they've got proficiency around that particular standard. So we still ask for them to use a lot of digital tools, even when they are asynchronous. But sometimes a good old discussion post works, you know, so you don't have to get too fancy with it, but sometimes you can just see what's taking place in a discussion room. So those are some of the tools that we're using.
Steve, anything on your end?
Well, I'll agree with what my colleagues have said. You know, in addition, just reminding teachers of even some of the things that aren't digital technology, using resources that students might find in their home as manipulatives, or going back to some of the work that we would do in person and asking the students and parents to be really a part of their learning, in addition to what all my colleagues have said. But one of the things that has helped us, we came out early on with a pretty specific schedule around what the synchronous time would look like, asynchronous, lunchtime for students, break times, office hours for teachers. And so I think that helped in a number of ways. One, it helped in students' expectations of what they were going to do during that time of day. We were very clear on the norms that students, as well as our teachers, needed to use while on Zoom or on a Teams meeting. And so we limit some of the negative behavior. I think we've learned and probably done a better job this semester of being able to limit that in a certain way. We didn't really know that that was going to be as much of an issue prior to going into this. And I think that also helps the teachers to not have to work late hours, early in the morning, late at night, where they know what their hours are, they know kind of the expectations, and then they can take that break and spend time with their own family and not have to work 24 hours a day.
Yeah, and I think Mark's asking that because, you know, we at D2L, we've been leading North America in terms of the virtual schools, and most of our big virtual school clients are all asynchronous in nature. Very few of them rely on a synchronous method for delivery. But we also recognize that, you know, as working as part of those projects, we've actually helped build out content for a lot of clients. And it takes a long time to build really high quality asynchronous content that can support these students and support their parents. So not an easy effort. You know, we're going to try to, sorry. We're trying to wrap up here shortly. So I just want to get a quick question from Terry. Yeah, so Terry, and I know Steve, you have end user support for your teachers or for your students. I wouldn't mind just quickly getting an input from you in terms of how you've set that up, and then, you know, if there's anyone else that wants to comment on that as well. But Terry is asking both Dr. Rosser and others on teacher support lines, and I think she's from DeKalb.
Okay, you want me to start?
Sure.
I was going to. So I'm assuming she's meaning teacher support around professional learning, like what they need.
Yeah, possibly. Have you set up a call line, I guess, for the teachers? Maybe it might be a yes or no question.
Yeah, we didn't do a call line for instructional support. We did a call line for technical support. They can call, you know, like our 1000 number to if they've got any issues with their devices. But from a professional learning standpoint, I mentioned earlier, I've got 22 educational technology specialists, and you know, this group is just, you know, high performing teachers who had a knack for technology, and I would kind of pluck them from different areas and build this superb team. They stayed on Zoom. They kind of had this open office hours where they could have teachers pop in at any point and ask a question about any platform. We did do very measured training starting in the late spring because we knew planning for the fall, where we had these ongoing technology conferences that we would do on Zoom. And each one of those ETSs are assigned to a cluster of schools. So I know who my person is that supports me, and I know how to access them if I need to have that kind of instructional technology support. And then again, our virtual professional learning communities, we have something called Facebook in the Workplace. So it's basically Facebook, but it's for work. And we've created these different groups around all the grade levels and sometimes around all the content. And teachers kind of go there. You guys have seen the magic of teachers. If they can collaborate, they'll answer each other's questions or say, did you try this? That has actually been one of the most surprisingly supportive platforms, in that at any point a teacher can go there and say, and they can post a screenshot and say, why is this not doing what I needed to do? Or what's the best way to teach the literacy standards in kindergartners on Zoom? You know, that's a very unique question, you know, that other kindergarten teachers can come and say, have you tried this, this, or this? So those have been our kind of lanes of support, I guess we have for teachers, but they always know they have a person that they can call on and just pop into a Zoom room and get some support.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I recognize we're also getting very close to the end of the hour here. And I think this conversation could easily go on for another hour at least. But I just want to end with you know, maybe just a quick recap on some of the conversation. I think, you know, I think we were searching for the words there, but I feel like the transformation that we're going through, you know, it starts off by going digital, then you get into this optimization phase, which sounds like everyone's at different points along that curve, and then you actually get into that digital transformation that I think you were talking about earlier, where we actually change the practice, do things differently, and engage students and hopefully into better outcomes, whether that's in the class, hybrid, or online. And I just want to say I applaud each of you for your leadership on taking your students, your teachers, your school staff through this. You know, Steve, I didn't give you a chance to answer that question, but I do want to leave with just a quick, you know, what's one word or two words that you want to share in terms of things that have inspired you, or you want to celebrate as part of the this transformation that we've gone through?
I think no doubt it's our people, whether it's our partners in all the organizations that work with us, or whether it's our teachers, administrators, support staff. Our people make the difference. Technology certainly helps, and we were prepared to move into this phase because of our planning. But I think it's the people, whether it's the people in organizations across the nation helping us get where we want to go, or the people right here in Gwinnett.
Well, you know, I think that's a great way to end it. And I know, Leilani, I think you're about to pull the plug on us. So I'm going to pass it back to you to help wrap. And again, thank you all to the panelists for what great leadership that you've demonstrated through this very challenging time. And I can't wait to get back onto the call with you and discuss this more. Thank you very much, each of you.
Yeah, thank you, John, Steve, Aaliyah, Emily, and Alvin. I know you had to go, but we did have one other question, and I'm going to have you guys answer that when we put the email out, because Donna from, I believe it's Halifax K-12 in Virginia, had asked a question, but we're out of time. So I want to thank everybody for joining today. This has been another hour with the EduJedi Leadership Learning Council and our fabulous sponsor, D2L. Thank you so much, John. All right, so until next time, thanks for being with us, and we hope that you took away a lot for your own school and your own district. Goodbye for now.
Thanks.
Thank you all for doing this.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.